confrontation between big tech companies and the Indian government over the country's new IT rules escalated on Tuesday after Twitter moved the Karnataka High Court, challenging the IT Ministry's order to remove content and block multiple accounts on the US microblogging platform. According to the writ petition, which has been seen by Business Standard, Twitter contended that many of the blocking orders issued under Section 69A of the Information Technology Act 2000 were overbroad, arbitrary, and disproportionate, and failed to give notice to authors of the content. It also said that some were related to political content posted by official handles of political parties, the blocking of which amounted to violation of freedom of speech. Twitter further argued that the content at issue does not have any apparent proximate relationship to the grounds under Section 69A. Hours after the petition was filed, Minister of State for IT, Rajiv Chandrasekhar, said all foreign internet platforms have a right to approach the courts, but they also have an unambiguous obligation to comply with local laws and rules. Twitter would risk losing its safe harbor protection under the intermediary rules if it refuses to comply with the blocking order, while its executives could face jail terms of up to 7 years. Under the IT rules that took effect in February last year, Twitter's chief compliance officer faces criminal liability for the company's non-compliance under Section 69A. Another provision requires strict confidentiality on all blocking requests from the government and actions taken by an intermediary.
The government feels it incumbent upon itself to create a workable safe harbor for social media to work. Now, the question that we have is this safe harbor truly safe? Does it lead to government overreach, state dictating to these platforms what they can post, what their users can post? And then you have very valid questions around freedom of speech. So I think as an intent, it is a good idea to have some kind of federal regulation of social media. But at the same time, we have to make sure that the fine principles behind the intermediary rules and any legislation that may follow should have fair checks and balances. And of course, these actions themselves should be amenable to judicial review. But that does not mean that the executive should have absolutely no ability to supervise at all. I personally feel that it creates a greater risk to platforms to have an opportunistic manner of regulation, which is random judges across states deciding to cherry pick which case fits the bill, which does not fit the bill. We need to have robust checks and balances, which somehow ensure that whatever the executive is doing is thought through. Allegations that sometimes executive orders don't appear to have application of mind, right? Or they may be targeted. So that kind of approach should be amenable to judicial review.
Twitter is not the first tech company to take the government to court over the IT rules. Meta-owned messaging platform WhatsApp had approached the Delhi High Court in May last year, requesting it to quash a provision that mandated companies to divulge the first originator of information. WhatsApp said the traceability rule would break the very guarantees that end-to-end encryption provides and undermines people's right to privacy. The government says that the right to privacy is not absolute and it is subject to reasonable restrictions. WhatsApp claims 500 million users in India, whereas for Twitter, India is its third biggest market, although estimates of its users in the country vary from 24 million to 48 million.
Clearly, there's an uneasy relationship between the government and big tech. The reason for this is very clear. The government has suddenly woken up to the immense power of Indian data and therefore wants the intermediaries to become far more accountable in this regard. Intermediaries have had a great honeymoon in the Indian context, where they have virtually been relegated to become mere spectators while mayhem happens on their network. And now, suddenly they find the status quo being disturbed, and they do not want the status quo to be disturbed. That's why these spate of litigations and petitions being filed before courts, so that somehow the status quo can be extended. But I think very quickly, the writing on the wall is crystal clear. And you have no choices but to comply with Indian law, specifically the Indian cyber law. And the Indian government is well within its sovereign rights to insist that all companies who are offering their services to Indians within India ought to comply with Indian law. I hope very quickly there should be some clarity, because this constant filing of litigations just in the expectation that we will have a lot of time and that we can extend our honeymoon, that phenomenon has to now stop.
Regulations shouldn't just be fair, their enforcement must also appear to be fair. With that in mind, won't the appearance of arbitrariness or bias in enforcement only weaken the government's efforts to regulate big tech?
If you like this video, share it and subscribe to Business Standard. For more news, views and insights, log on to www.business-standard.com. Do also follow us on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Telegram and LinkedIn.
सब अच्छी दिख रही हैं यार, कौन सी खरीदूं?
ये तो वही बात हुई, 4000 शेयर्स लिस्टेड है, कौन सा लूं?
वो तो सबसे आसान है।
तुझे 5 पैसा नहीं पता?
अब तो सबको पता है। 5 पैसा पर है 4000 स्टॉक्स की रिसर्च, टेक्निकल टूल्स और इन्वेस्टमेंट आइडियाज। डाउनलोड 5 पैसा नाउ।
अब तो सबको पता है, investing made easy and rewarding with 5 paisa. Investments in securities market are subject to market risks. Read all the related documents carefully before investing.